The body before the argument. The body before the argument in January 2018 in London, Cathy Newman of Channel 4 News interviewed Jordan Peterson on the gender pay gap, free speech, and a number of related topics. The interview ran for 30 minutes. It was edited down for broadcast and posted in full on YouTube the following day. The full version has been viewed, at the time of writing, more than 50 million times. Newman is an experienced television interviewer. She has the journalist's reflex of repeating a guest's position back in a sharper, more committed form, on the gamble that the guest will accept the sharpened version and thereby be on the record for something more extreme than they actually said. The reflex has a phrase in the broadcast trade, "So what you're saying is." It is followed by a paraphrase that the guest, if they are not paying attention, will agree to. Peterson did not agree to any of the paraphrases. He corrected each of them, calmly, sentence by sentence, sometimes with a slight smile, never raising his voice. By about the 14-minute mark, Newman was visibly off her preparation. She was reaching for the next question, while Peterson was still finishing the previous answer. Her tempo had accelerated. Her posture had changed. By the 22-minute mark, she had asked a question, a difficult one, technically, about whether free speech included the freedom to offend, and Peterson had answered it carefully, and there was a long pause. Then Peterson said, "Gotcha." Newman said, "You have got me, I'm completely stuck." It was a moment of unusual honesty in a contemporary interview. It was also, more importantly for our purposes, a public physiological event. The interviewer had crossed the threshold above which the deliberative system stops working, and the interviewee had not. The interviewer was over 100 beats per minute. The interviewee was probably under 80. The audience could see this. The clip, when it propagated for this reason. It was not primarily a clip about ideas. It was a clip about the difference between someone whose body was managing the argument and someone whose body was no longer able to. This is the second thing you need to understand about debate. The first was that the audience is the prize. The second is that the argument happens in a body, and if the body is flooded, the argument is lost, regardless of who has the better case. Above approximately 100 beats per minute, the human cardiovascular system enters a regime that John Gottman, the marriage researcher, named flooding. Flooding is what happens when the sympathetic nervous system mobilizes faster than the parasympathetic system can damp it. Adrenaline rises. Cortisol rises. Blood is shunted from the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for verbal reasoning, working memory, and emotional regulation, to the limbic system and the major muscle groups, which are preparing for fight or flight. In a flooded state, you can still speak. You can still produce sentences. The sentences will not be your best sentences. You will reach for words and find none. You will accept paraphrases you would have rejected 90 seconds earlier. You will say things you would not have said. You will, depending on your default temperament, either escalate the fight response or shut down the flight response. Neither is what you want. Gottman's original research was on married couples having difficult conversations. He found that once heart rate crossed about 100 beats per minute in a conversation, no productive exchange occurred for the next 20 minutes regardless of what the participants did. The participants thought they were still arguing. They were still using words. The words were not making any progress. The next productive exchange would happen, on average, 20 minutes after the heart rate had returned to baseline. The implication for debate is structural. If your opponent can get you above 100, they have won the next 20 minutes of the encounter, regardless of the merits. If you can get your opponent above 100, you have won. Most people, untrained, can be brought to flooding within 5 to 7 minutes by a sufficiently hostile interlocutor. Most professional debaters, trained, can hold a baseline below 90 for an hour. The differential is enormous. It is also entirely physiological. It is something the body learns to do. It is not something the will overrides. The training for this is not new. Different traditions across the world have developed it independently. The Stoic exposure practices premeditatio malorum, the deliberate rehearsal of expected difficulties. The Tibetan Lojong mind training in the face of provocation. The Japanese Kendo Zanshin, the maintained awareness that survives an exchange of cuts. The contemporary special operations performance physiology work. Mark divines the way of the SEAL, the protocols developed by Andrew Huberman's lab. All of these are programs for staying below the flooding threshold under conditions designed to push the practitioner past it. The protocols differ in detail. They agree in structure. The Indian tradition Shankara was trained in had its own version. It was called Sadhana Chatushtaya, the fourfold preparation. The four are Viveka, the discrimination between what is permanent and what is temporary, Vairagya, dispassion toward sense objects, Shatsampati, the six accomplishments, which include Shama, mental quietude, and Dharma, sense control, and Mumokshatva, the desire for liberation. By any reading of the surviving accounts, Shankara had completed this preparation by the time he was 10. He was, by every contemporaneous and later report, the calmest man in any room he entered for the rest of his life. The Mandana debate ran for 8 days. Multiple accounts mention his unhurried tempo, his unstrained voice, his willingness to sit silent for several seconds before answering. Mandana, a man of unusual composure himself, was reportedly visibly more agitated than Shankara by day 6. The garlands wilting around the disputants, fresh marigolds, hung at the start of each day, wilting on whoever was losing, had been Abhir Bharati's instrument of judgment, not the participants. By the end, Shankara's were still fresh. Mandana's were dead. This is not a coincidence. This is not a literary embellishment. This is what the 8 days looked like to the people watching. One man's body was holding the argument. The other man's body was being held by it. The garlands were tracking what the audience could already see. The body comes first. The argument comes second. The body that is steady supports an argument that can be steady. The body that is flooded cannot support any argument, however well prepared. There are 4 interventions that, in combination, will keep most debaters below the flooding threshold under most conditions short of physical danger. They are well documented. They are not original to me. They are the consensus of the contemporary performance physiology literature, the consensus of the major contemplative traditions, and the consensus of the senior trial lawyers I have asked. I will give them to you in the order in which you should learn them. The first is box breathing. 4 seconds inhale, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds exhale, 4 seconds hold. Repeat for 2 to 4 minutes. Box breathing was popularized by Mark Divine in the SEAL community, but the technique long predates him. It appears in the Indian pranayama tradition under the name Sama Vritti, equal quartered breath. Its mechanism is straightforward. The slow, regular, mostly exhaled cycle activates the vagal complex of the parasympathetic nervous system, which damps the cardiovascular response. After 4 minutes of box breathing, your resting heart rate will be 5 to 15 beats per minute lower than when you started. More importantly, the threshold at which you flood, the heart rate at which the parasympathetic system stops being able to compensate, has been raised. You can take more incoming pressure before the system goes critical. The second is the physiological sigh, 2 short inhales through the nose, followed by 1 long exhale through the mouth. Repeat 3 times. The physiological sigh was characterized in the contemporary research literature by Jack Feldman at UCLA and popularized by Andrew Huberman. It appears spontaneously in animals after stress events, and it produces the fastest known reduction in cardiovascular arousal that human beings can self-induce. The 2 short inhales recruit the alveoli that close under stress. The long exhale discharges the carbon dioxide that accumulates during shallow breathing. The net effect is a measurable drop in heart rate within 10 to 15 seconds. The physiological sigh is your between rounds tool. You will use it before walking onto a stage, before answering a particularly hostile question. Between ringing the doorbell and the door opening, it is the fastest physiological intervention you have. The third is the motor reset. Stand, plant the feet shoulder width, roll the shoulders down and back, drop the chin a half inch, open the chest, hold for 30 seconds. The motor reset works because the body's posture feeds back into the body's physiology. An open chest and dropped shoulders signal I am safe, and the parasympathetic system reads the signal and damps accordingly. The reset is the move you do in the bathroom mirror 3 minutes before the meeting starts. It is also the move you do at your desk when an email has just arrived that you do not want to read. The body's reading of the body's posture is faster than the mind's reading of the email's content. Reset the body, and the mind will read more clearly. The fourth is the cognitive priming statement. One sentence said aloud or silently that names what you are about to do and the disposition you intend to bring to it. I am going to listen carefully and answer honestly. I am here to learn what is true, not to win the argument. I am the calmest person in this room. The priming statement is not magic. It is a way of orienting attention. The brain follows attention. Attention oriented toward listening, learning, calm will tend to produce listening, learning, calm. Attention oriented toward winning, defending, attacking will tend to produce the cardiovascular profile that goes with those activities. The priming statement is your declaration of which attentional regime you intend to enter. It works better if you mean it. Combine these four into a sequence, and you have what I call the pre-debate protocol. I am going to ask you to do this protocol before every meeting that matters to you, every difficult phone call, every encounter you have prepared for. I am going to ask you to do it for 30 days as a pure discipline practice, regardless of whether the encounter you are heading into actually warrants it. The point of the 30-day discipline is to make the protocol automatic, so that on the day when you walk into a meeting you did not know was going to be the most consequential meeting of your year, the protocol fires anyway. You walk in primed. Most of the highest stakes encounters in my life have been ones I did not know in advance were the highest stakes encounters. The protocol existed because I had practiced it daily. Without the daily practice, I would have walked in unprepared, and there would have been no second chance. A few specific notes on what flooding looks like in others, because the ability to read flooding in your opponent is at least as useful as the ability to manage it in yourself. The first sign is breath. Flooded people breathe shallowly and high in the chest. Their shoulders rise visibly with each inhale. The exhale becomes shorter than the inhale, which is the inverse of the resting pattern. If your opponent's shoulders are moving with each breath, they are above 85 and rising. They are 8 or 9 sentences from flooding. The second sign is tempo. Flooded people accelerate. They reach for the next question or the next assertion before completing the previous one. They interrupt themselves. Their sentences shorten and lose subordinate clauses. They use more filler, the point is, than they did 3 minutes earlier. The third sign is gaze. Flooded people break eye contact and do not return to it. They look at the table, at their notes, at the wall. They scan for an exit. The eye contact pattern becomes evasive in a way that anyone with a mammalian nervous system reads instantly. The fourth sign is grip. Flooded people clench. Knuckles whiten on the chair arm or the lectern or the pen. Jaw muscles visibly tighten. The shoulders, which under the motor reset would be down and back, rise toward the ears. When you see 2 or more of these 4 signs in your opponent, you have several minutes during which their argument will not improve and several seconds during which a clean, costly signal, a clear concession, a slowed sentence, a deliberate silence will move the audience decisively. You do not have to attack. You only have to remain steady. The contrast between your composure and their flooding does the rest of the work, and the room will see it. Shankara, by every account, never flooded. 8 days of sustained debate against the most respected Mimamsa philosopher of his generation, with a public wager attached and his entire career on the line, and he never raised his voice. when he was out-argued by Chandala on the road to Vishwanath. The encounter we will study in detail. He prostrated. The body responded before the mouth did. The body's response was the costliest signal he could have given. It was possible only because the body was steady to begin with. Most opponents you face will not have this training. Most of your colleagues, your family members, your political opponents, the strangers who write angry replies to your social media posts, they will be operating from a flooded baseline. Many of them are flooded most of the time. The gift of training your own physiology is that you arrive into encounters at a level of composure they cannot match, and the encounter is, in important ways, decided before either of you opens your mouth. The argument is downstream of the body. The body is downstream of the breath. The breath is something you can train.